to Once Upon a Mealtime. I'm Doug, your host, and this is my kitchen. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and also mash down on that notification bell so you will be apprised of whenever there is new content. Most people have fond memories of their mother's cooking. I know I do. And if you have a favorite recipe from your childhood, you may want to adapt it to a healthier version. Today, I'm doing just that. I'm changing my mother's chocolate mayonnaise cake into a gluten-free, keto-friendly version. Now, I could just give you the new recipe, but I want to walk you through my thought processes on how to make those kinds of changes. You're going to see my mother's original recipe, and then I'm going to walk you through mine, and I'll have both versions down in the show notes for you to use any way you like. Here's Mom's recipe. She had sugar, flour, salt, cocoa, baking soda, baking powder, water, mayonnaise, and vanilla. Pretty simple recipe, and it was a matter of just pouring it into a cake pan and putting it in the oven for about 40 minutes at 350 degrees. Now let's walk through those ingredients and let's look at this scientifically. We want to ask ourselves, what exactly does each ingredient really do in that recipe? First, there's sugar. That's obvious. This thing needs to be sweet. It's got cocoa and mayonnaise. Come on, it's got to be sweet. We've got 2 cups of flour. Now that's a little tricky here. If you're going to take that flour out, you really need to think about what flour does. Well, flour actually absorbs water, so that means that it increases in volume. We also have some water retention, so that as that cake is done and it's sitting out, it's going to stay moist for a while. It absorbs oil. Again, that helps with the moistness. And flour acts as an emulsifier. It's going to help water and oil mix together and stay mixed. Then starch in that flour will gelatinize. So that means it's going to help give it some body. It's going to help hold it together. That's something we're going to need to replace. We have salt. Salt actually helps with the color of crust when you're baking things. And here it strengthens the gluten bonds. So we're making that gluten actually stronger, making it hold together just a little better. And that's something we're going to have to pay attention here too. Cocoa, obvious, it's a chocolate cake. Baking soda, that's our leavening agent, or at least part of our leavening agents. And it's going to help ensure a good crumb in the cake. It actually strengthens the gluten as well, and it adds a little bit of saltiness. Baking powder, again, a leavening agent. The difference between baking soda and baking powder, just remember, soda spreads, powder puffs. So this actually will make it a little lighter in texture. We've got water, mayonnaise, and vanilla. So the water, we need the moisture. Mayonnaise, this is replacing the oil in the eggs in most actual cake recipes. And the vanilla will be a counterbalance to that cocoa. So here's our replacements. Instead of sugar, I'm using Lakanto monk fruit sweetener. It's 0 calorie, 0 carbs, perfect substitution, and it substitutes 1-for-1 normally with sugar. In this case, I'm going to increase a little bit, but that's only because I'm going to be increasing the cocoa later on, and I need to account for that. I've got 2 cups of flour, so here's what's happening. I'm going to use 1/3 of a cup of almond flour. This is our structural component. It's kind of like sand inside our cement, okay? It has to be there for structure so that it will hold together. What I don't want to miss out on is the water absorption and the oil absorption. So I'm going to use coconut flour to replace that. I'm going to use 2/3 of a cup of coconut flour, and that should be sufficient to replace that water absorption property. I'm going to use 1/8 of a teaspoon of xanthan gum because I need that emulsifier in there. And xanthan gum is a very good emulsifier. Then I'm going to use 3/8 of a teaspoon of carboxymethylcellulose. That's something you've probably never used before. It's something you don't usually find out at your local grocery store. I have to order it off of Amazon, and it does a great job of substituting for that gelatinizing component of starch. And then finally, I'm going to add in 2 egg whites beaten into soft peaks. This again will help with the structure and the lightness just a little bit. We've got the salt. The cocoa is going to be upped by 1 tablespoon, so I'll be using 6 tablespoons of cocoa. But I'm also going to add a little secret ingredient here, and that's 3 tablespoons of Kahlua liqueur. Now, why? I don't want to lie to you. Anytime you start making major changes to a recipe, you're going to end up with something that does not taste like the original. This is not going to taste exactly like the original. But if I add some other flavors and I strengthen the flavors, you're not going to notice it nearly as much. It's going to give your brain something else to focus on and say, oh, that is good. So, we're going to keep the baking soda and the baking powder. The water, we're going to reduce it by 1/4 of a cup because we've got the addition of the Kahlua and the egg whites. And then the mayonnaise is going to stay the same, except we're using our keto-friendly mayonnaise. And we're going to add the vanilla again as a counterbalance to that chocolate flavor. So here's the final recipe. 1 generous cup of monk fruit sweetener, 1 1/3 cups of almond flour. We've got 2/3 cup of coconut flour, 3/8 teaspoon of carboxymethylcellulose, 1/8 of a teaspoon of xanthan gum, a teaspoon of salt, 6 tablespoons of cocoa, 1 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, same amount of baking powder, 3/4 of a cup of water, 2 egg whites beaten, 1 cup of keto mayonnaise, and 2 teaspoons of vanilla, and finally 3 tablespoons of Kahlua liqueur. Let's get set up and we'll go through actually putting this cake together and getting it baked. I'll be back in just a moment. We are back through the magic of YouTube. I've gotten some few things ready here. For instance, I have my cake pan and I've sprayed it with oil and dusted it with some coconut flour to be ready. My oven is preheated to 350 degrees. Now in this bowl, I have my dry ingredients. That's the monk fruit sweetener, almond flour, coconut flour, the carboxymethylcellulose. Available off of Amazon. I am not getting any kind of kickback or any kind of money off of selling this, but I am recommending it. You can get it from Kitchen Alchemy. Wonderful stuff. One of my secret ingredients for actually cooking this way. I also have my xanthan gum. Now you can get that in most grocery stores, but I want to talk to you about xanthan gum for just a moment. It is very important that when you use it, you actually mix it with your dry ingredients thoroughly, because what happens, I've got myself just a cup of water here for demonstration. I'm going to put a little xanthan gum in that, and I'm going to try to give that a mix. And what you're going to end up with is a mess. This stuff will never dissolve this way. It will not happen. You're going to end up with little lumps, gelatinous lumps. It's going to feel awful. You're going to bite into those dry, hard lumps. It just will not dissolve. So you will need to take that and mix it in with your dry ingredients before you do add any water to it. So I'm going to mix my dry ingredients here. I've got my flours, my cocoa, my leavening agents, all of that stuff, and I want it mixed well before I add any liquids to it. And sure, this is exciting watching me stir this in. That's very exciting. Contain yourselves, everyone. All right. This nasty mess right here, and that is a nasty mess, is my water, Kahlua, mayonnaise, and vanilla. And I just want to give that a quick mix. And if I reach 1,000 subscribers by the end of the week, I'll actually mix some of this up and drink it as is. Yum! Not. I don't care how many subscribers I get. I'm not taking that and drinking it. Okay. All right, mixed up, ready to go. So I'm going to put this in my blender. And when we come back, I'll fold in my egg whites for you. Welcome back. Through the magic of YouTube, I've shortened this process a little bit. Here is the batter. I wanted to show you how that turned out before adding the egg whites to it. So as you can see, it's a little bit stiff. Those egg whites are going to thin that up a little bit, lighten it up, but I think it would work all right as a cake batter, but it's going to be a little bit heavy, just as is. So these egg whites are really going to help that. So I'm going to take my egg whites here. I'm going to put a few of those in there. I'm going to start folding those in a little at a time. This is something you want to be very careful with. You don't want to deflate those egg whites completely. So now I'll get the rest of that. Through the magic of YouTube, I may shorten this process for you just a little bit here. All right, I believe that's good. Just put this in the pan. I'm being careful not to disturb my coconut flour coating on there too much. I don't want to take that off of there. Now that flour coating is important because, yes, a lot of keto recipes you're going to see people putting parchment paper down, and that's important because keto-friendly stuff can stick madly. But what we need in here is for the cake batter to have a surface to cling to so that it will help it rise, because we don't want it crawling up the sides of the pan and then falling back down while it's heating. This will keep it from doing that. And if this doesn't work, I may change my mind and use parchment paper, but I think this is going to work just fine. Fill in that last little corner there. Even it out. And we'll be back in about 40 minutes to look at the final product here and see how it tastes. And there we have it, straight out of the oven. I had to bake it for about 50 minutes actually for this to come out. So do watch your times when you do this. And we're going to cut into it. It is still hot. It's tender. It's moist. It'll be one of the moistest cakes you've ever eaten. That first piece is going to be a little difficult to get out whole, but there we go. You just grab a fork. Look at that. Look at that crumb on there. Look how tender that is. Tender, moist. Oh, take it from me. That's good. Give this a try. You're going to love this keto-friendly, low-carb, moist, and delicious chocolate cake. Comment below. Let me know how this turns out for you. And as always, may we eat happily ever after.